unfinished business. I'll ask the clerk to go back to item 3 and then we'll follow with item 4.
PAC report number 1, November 18, 2013. PAC recommendation, part of the city funding CIP funding application. The action recommended is council endorse the one PAC recommendation as presented for 45th Avenue, the Agape Centre applicant. Program.
Sorry, go ahead.
Program 2, building and restoration improvement, $30,000. Program 3, project design grant, $2,000. Project 4, facade improvement design grant, $10,000. Program 5, municipal planning development fees grant, $9,000. Program 6, discretionary municipal tipping fees grant. And Program 7, parking and landscape enhancement, $15,700.
Moved by Councillor Sampson, second by Councillor Flynn. On debate. Councillor Grant, followed by Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, at the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, I'm the chair, so I couldn't vote on this unless it's a tie, and unless it's a tie, that I won't support this agreement. Our CPAC committee, as I said at the last council meeting, our council gave them guidelines to go by. The guidelines are such that it was consistent with the general agreement from the province on how we allocate some of these funds. They don't fall within the guidelines, and that committee is going to have a difficult time understanding where they go from here. Are the guidelines going to be adhered to, or are they not? Sometimes they're not adhered to, but there's very good justification because they're in the priority area. So as far as I'm concerned, this building is not in the priority area, and it isn't designed according to what the guidelines fit. They don't fit the guidelines at all. So as far as I'm concerned, what we should be doing is telling the committee, we want you to follow the guidelines, and we're doing that by refusing to approve this funding. CPAC sent it forward. It's went to PAC. We had a long, convoluted debate on that, went back and forth. Now, we're in a position right now to say, no, CPAC committee, we support you, and we support the guidelines that we gave you. So I hope the members of council will look and say, yes, we're going to support the CPAC recommendations because they're following the guidelines we gave.
Councillor Carr, followed by Councillor Murphy, please.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Like my colleague, Councillor Grant, we use the same argument that the guidelines are there. The guidelines were approved by council, and the CPAC committee has approved more than 160 applications, which is empowered with the responsibility of recommending to PAC and then to council, and PAC would then recommend to council on these particular programs. It does create a problem. Is this a vote of non-confidence in the CPAC committee? I don't know. I would hope we wouldn't see it that way, but I can't speak for everyone on that. I can tell you that the people on the CPAC committee have been there for at least 3 or 4 years. The only change that's been recently was Mr. Levac took on other responsibilities, so he was replaced by Mr. St. Marseille. But the committee is made up of members of administration, members of council, and lay appointments from the community who have a great interest. Some confusion, and I read things in the paper this morning that said this has been approved, and it hasn't. It's approved. It's up to this body, council. But is it always necessary when we talk about, I think in the one report that talked about how it's taken, this project has been delayed some 6 weeks. And I'm thinking that maybe we can eliminate one level of bureaucracy. If we do have confidence in the CPAC committee, shouldn't the CPAC committee report directly to council with their recommendations? Or should it be that if the planning department or the planning committee reports directly for council, what is the need for the CPAC committee? I think that whole thing has to be straightened out. I think I'm very disappointed that this has happened the way it has, and I can see that I'm not particularly thrilled by it, but I would ask for a recording vote. Thank you.
Councillor Murphy, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And Councillor Carr raised a couple of very interesting points regarding moving forward with this committee as well. My only concern by supporting this is we've opened the door for businesses outside, groups outside the designated areas to apply. There's a restricted area, There are restrictions in place, approved by council. And moving forward, it's going to be more difficult to say no to those recommendations that are borderline, maybe not borderline, or that are spread throughout the city now, because the city is expanding, the business community is expanding throughout the city as well. And if store in the north end of town comes looking for facade improvement, how do we say no now? They're outside the guidelines, but yet there are reasons that we could accept it. I'm just a little worried about where we're going to go and if we're going to be able to end up being able to accommodate everybody. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Sampson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The committee is a committee that reports to CPAC. It's not a committee of council. So its order is to report to CPAC, and then CPAC reports to council. Many other charities, I thank the committee for doing due diligence, but all they're doing, Mr. Mayor, is recommending to us. It's up to us, the councilors that are sitting at this table, to see if the need is required. Many other charities have been served, such as the RCF, the Sound Clothing Mill, the Boys and Girls Club, the Army Navy Club, dentists. We go as far as 9th and 7th and Pitt, yet we won't allow something that's 500 feet away at 5th and Augustus or 5th and Pitt, yet we go over to 1st Street, that's 1st and Augustus. So I don't see how it doesn't fall in the heart of the city, when the city should go right to 9th Street as far as I know and what I asked at the committee. How come we're going to 1st Augustus? Well, we won't go 500 feet where the need is required. That building is 50 years old. I was present when that building was built with Mr. Rod Scott. That building is in need. Its service are less needy. It services the people that require help, Mr. Mayor, and I'm in favor of this motion, and that's why I'm voting in favor of it.
Councillor Yvette, please, followed by Councillor Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make it very clear before, I have all confidence in the world in the CPAC recommendations. I think it's a committee like other committees that comes back and make presentations to the PAC committee sends to the council. I think this is, and the way I look at it, I think I know that one of my colleagues was very strong against it, and I explained to him my reasoning for it. This money is taken from interest from $3.5 million for the downtown area. So that the fundings are there. If we don't support this through that funding, I can see them come to this table through outside agencies. Maybe they're not looking for 56. Maybe look for 185 is what's going to cost them to do all work. So I think it's, and if they start, coming here and start hanging some words on like health and safety stuff, we're not going to look very good. I think this is a way of giving them what they need without affecting the tax base. So we'll have, last year to give them $10,000, we'll have a $10,000 savings in the outside agencies there. Because they probably would come back, come back for more. So I think that this is my reasoning for approving this thing. Thank you.
Councillor Tebow, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to administration. I've heard comments that this particular building is outside the designated for restricted area. My understanding is that when we had the discussion at PAC the other night, we were told that it's within the area. And I guess I go to the comments that have been made by some of my speakers who spoke before I did. I was always under the understanding that it was from Augustus to 9th Street to Water Street and to, I can't remember where, going east. And the other night at PAC, I supported this particular initiative after asking a question specifically around that, and also the eligibility of the organization. There's a part that was provided to us talked about eligibility of the organizations or the businesses to the funding. And I guess I need for administration to tell me again that this building is actually within the restricted area and the designated area, and is within the area that we're supposed to be serving with this particular programs. program or programs, and that it also is eligible under the criteria of whether you're a business or an organization, and therefore qualify for the program. And I asked those questions, I got the answers that I needed to be able to support it. If that's wrong, then I have to look at my whole card.
Mr. Alexander?
And Mr. Mayor, to help you understand that, we take the city as its whole geography. Within that, we define an area called the heart of the city area where programs, there's a general ability to apply for those programs. That is a broader area, and within that, the plan sets out 2 key priority areas, and they are primarily the central downtown area and the Live Village. So the way the program works is the priority, and they're defined as priority areas, and that word is used in the plan. So clearly, there's an emphasis that those 2 areas will be the highest priority and the priority for funding applications that are made on the program. There are and have been some applications that are made outside of that, and they are looked at, and I believe it's being described, they are looked at on the merits of those individual cases, right? And requires a specific recommendation to come forward to planning committee and then onwards to council to say, although this is outside of the priority area, it is in some cases a landmark location, it may be a gateway location and deserves, has merit and deserves consideration. So there is a general, this area falls in the general area, it does not fall in the priority.
Can you identify for me what the priority area is?
The priority area,
What's the
it would be
boundaries
easier with a
of
map,
priority
but
area?
essentially the priority area is the area covered by the central business district zoning in downtown, and that kind of jogs around a little bit, but with respect to Pitt Street, it narrows it, it goes up to Pitt Street, it goes to Fifth Street, but is narrowed to those uses which are fronting on Pitt Street. In the Live Village area, it's the boundary of the commercial 70 zone.
Okay. I understand the Fifth Street. Now, tell me where the western boundary is. My understanding is that up to Augustus is the western boundary.
Yeah, the CBD zoning jumps Augustus a little bit by the Big Brothers, for example, just because of the nature of that use, because of the previous zoning application. But generally the CBD zoning goes to Augustus. It extends a little bit along 2nd Street in the area of 2nd and Augustus.
So what you're
I
telling
almost
me
need to
is
pull a map up.
Augustus to 2nd Street, and then 2nd Street to Pitt, and then up.
It goes to Sydney, and it covers all the way to Water
But
Street.
it does not cover Augustus to 5th.
No, it covers Pitt Street and the parts of Pitt Street up to 5th, but in the immediate vicinity of Pitt Street. Does that help? I mean, it's almost easier to graphically represent that. If we could pull up the GIS, I can show it to you. But
Okay, thank you.
Councilman McDonald, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's so interesting hearing the questions and the answers. I did suggest at our last meeting if we had an overhead map. So hopefully the next time we talk about the heart of the city priority areas, we'll have the overhead map. Because it's difficult to see why a building can get approved at Augustus and 3rd, but not be approved in the middle of between Augustus and Pitt and 5th. So I think the geography, I argue, is ambiguous, especially when somebody further west qualifies that. And I think Councilor Carr's points very clearly that we have to look at the administration of this program and make it clear to all of us, because we've been around this table for a number of years and still some of us are confused as to just what the rules and the protocols are. I know precedent has people afraid that if we were to go so far as to make an exception, we'd have to maybe do it for everybody, but I would suggest that precedents have been set with Big Brother and Big Sisters, which is farther west of Agape Centre getting a grant, then I think it's pretty hard to say, well, Agape, you're somehow in kind of a vacuum geographically, you know? If farther west is okay, then I think the Agape Centre should be too. So I would hope, though, that this program gets reviewed and then taught to all of us so that we know what the boundaries are, but I would also suggest that it would not be appropriate to make that review in the middle of an application, especially one that has come before us now for 3 times, and in each instance, it's, we recognize there's some lack of clarity, but I think that in the middle of an application, it would be a rather cruel time to say, stop, we can't afford to continue a precedent or whatever, so I hope my colleagues will support this motion.
Okay, Councilor DePaul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to administration, I'm going to ask the question because I keep feeling like we keep having the same things not clarified. So the 2 examples that have been put out this evening through you, Mr. Mayor, is Big Brothers and Big Sisters are in the district and Agape Centre is not in the district.
Mr. Alexander?
If it's council wishes, I have a paper copy of the map here, and I can provide you the copy, but in fairness, they are clearly outside the area. It is the responsibility of CPAC to go through these applications. They know the rules and they understand this fully and bring recommendations forward. And it's clearly outside of those areas. And to me, there is no doubt about what the boundaries are. The CPAC has doing that. The maps there, they are outside the boundary, which has the implication being not that they can't get funding, but there has to be a specific decision to allow them in, if you would. So clearly they don't meet one of the tests. That doesn't make them ineligible in totality. It makes the provision that they must get a specific approval for that site.
My question, so when you say they're out, meaning
They are out, they're clearly outside the boundary, and I can provide you.
and the Big Brother
Is
is
it?
in?
It's in the CBD zoning, and this building is not in the CBD zoning.
So for this, when we didn't have enough information, we asked for it to come back, and I clearly think that here we are looking at funding that we get and people asking for funding, and we are asked to follow the rules all the time, and unfortunately, I think you can't look at what the cause is or what the building is, and you have to look at whether or not people fit the criteria, or the application fits it or doesn't fit it. And if it doesn't fit it, for me, you have to, go with those decisions and say that that application did not fit the criteria and not support it at this time, and maybe there's more work that administration can do with that application to bring it forward. And I agree, we need more clarification on the committee, and as far as, the CPAC committee being there or not being there, that's stuff for us to all decide as a council as a whole. But on this issue, we're debating whether or not they fit the application, and I'm being told by administration that they do not fit the application. So therefore, I will not vote for it.
Okay, just go around for this one. Councilor Gardner, please.
Thank you. They don't fit the criteria, I said that last week, and I'm still saying it now. But what bothered me most is in 2009, that same organization came to this table, asked for $200,000, and said they would not come back for any more money. They really are back for money. How often is that going to happen? They need the funding, we need to find another way to do it. They don't fit the criteria, and for that, just for that alone, I'm going to deny and vote against it.
Councilor Clement, please.
Do the rules, for you, Mr. Mayor, prohibit this applicant getting funds?
Mr. Alexander?
The rules do not prohibit it. Let's follow the decision tree if we can, if this helps. CPAC reviewed the application. CPAC suggested that it was not sufficiently meritorious to move this application along. That went to planning committee. That went some back and forth. What really is in front of the council tonight is not a staff recommendation rather than this. It's a decision of the planning advisory committee at the last meeting, which said it considered the CPAC recommendations and decided on the basis of the application, what CPAC's recommendations are, to make a recommendation that the application be approved. It is not ineligible. It needs a specific approval because it is outside of the priority areas. So I don't know how else I can say that. The matter before council is the planning committee's recommendation.
So my question was, do the rules prohibit their eligibility? And the answer was no, the rules do not prohibit. We have considered other nonprofits. We have considered eligible nonprofits outside or just outside of the zones. And my understanding of the CPAC committee, and I sat there for 4 years in my first term, and I agree with Councillor Carr and Councillor Yvette that this is an excellent committee. It's actually one of the best committees. They spend hours poring over applications and reviewing. There's a lot of debate there, and it's not unanimous. But in the history that I remember with that committee, sometimes there are exceptions. And sometimes we say, no, you're outside of the priority area, but we'll consider this. Or yes, you're a nonprofit, but quite fit the guidelines, but we'll grant it to you. And so I support this application because they've made an application. They want to use the funds for building restoration, facade, sign, accessibility, the usual things that would make a location look appropriate, make it welcoming for the residents of Cornwall, like countless other applications that we've approved. Again, the rules do not prohibit that we consider this to be eligible. And so I feel that they've met the test, that they're going to use the funds like other nonprofits and other agencies have used the funds even when they're slightly outside of the zone. And so I support the application.
Clarifications or questions to administration, Councillor?
Yes, Number one, Mr. Mayor, I would like to know, is this all given money or is it some money just loaned and paid back?
I think some are direct grants and some are low interest loans. So I think on page 5 of your agenda, you can see the word grant appears in several of those things. Those are clearly direct grants, and some of the others in some cases are shared costs or in some cases low interest loans.
Well, you're looking here at $50-some thousand. It's on grants. It doesn't have to be, it's not really giving them the money. They're going to have to pay some of it back.
Yeah, there is a substantial grant portion to it. I don't want to mislead council that there clearly, there clearly is some grant elements to this.
It's amounts and grant have been paid back.
Yeah.
So yes. My other question, Mr. Mayor, is just to ask, and it just boggles my mind, why would you even take the application if they didn't meet the criteria? Simple as that.
I have a point of clarification also being sought, Councillor Dupont.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For you, I would just like clarification from Mr. Alexander is the difference between it doesn't prohibit, the rules don't prohibit them from getting the funding versus they don't fit the criteria. Maybe that's a little, it's not very clear.
The eligibility is based on geography and the nature of the use, right? So we've had a long debate about the geography of the Heart of the City area is a broader area than just the two areas we're talking about. But because the program was the funding program was really about downtown renewal and the forgiving some funds, there was a decision when the programs were set up that the priority areas would be those two key commercial areas that are the downtown and the localized Main Street. And the kinds of projects that advance and are talked about what the objectives of the program are to really deal with the viability and continuing viability of buildings downtown to be able to support commercial uses, facade improvements, and also kind of dealing with building envelope. Is a building, does it need roof repairs and those kinds of things. So I think that as was described, the CPAC went through this in considerable detail and looked at both of those issues. Does it front one of our main streets? And the areas, even though it might be outside, and I think in that phase, they felt this use was somewhat in the interior of a block and didn't kind of advance in the street, and was also not necessarily the kinds of use that was the fundamental target of the program. Recognize with these kind of programs, there are multiple buildings and multiple uses, in some cases mixed uses with residential and commercial. And so the programs are laid out with respect to what are the main objectives, and that's the test that the CPAC uses against all the applications, and results in some of the debate that Councillor Clement spoke about. But those are the things that happen and quite thoroughly get reviewed at CPAC before it comes to some recommendations to the
Thank you.
Further clarification, Councillor Flynn?
Well, just, I know many of my colleagues have asked this question. If you look at the program, number 2, building restoration and improvements, $30,000. 12,000 of that is forgivable, 18,000 of that is an interest-free loan. All of these programs are 50/50, so to be eligible for the $10,000 in facade improvement and signs, you have to have, it's a $20,000 project, 10,000 of which is a grant. So the grants work in 2 ways, matching funds, and some of the loans are interest-free loans that must be repaid. And during the lifetime of the loan agreement, the city will have a lien on that building.
Point of information, Governor, what's the point of information on that?
Yeah.
At the CPAC meeting, we debate all these issues, and it was unanimous to reject it. That's why I say we debated all these issues. So that's a point of information. It wasn't like a 50-60 or 40-60 split.
Appreciate our council has taken this issue with all the seriousness that it deserves, and respectful debate that took place amongst all of you, whether yea or nay. Plans for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is denied.